October 15th, 2024. Jessica Martinez stood in the bridal preparation room of St. Catherine's Church, adjusting her grandmother's pearl necklace and trying to calm her pre-wedding nerves. In 30 minutes, she would walk down the aisle to marry Tom Richardson, the man she had loved for 4 years and had been planning to spend the rest of her life with. The church was filled with 200 guests. The photographer was capturing every moment, and everything was proceeding perfectly according to the detailed timeline Jessica had spent months perfecting. Her bridesmaids were putting finishing touches on their makeup. Her father was waiting to walk her down the aisle, and Tom was presumably getting ready with his groomsmen in a separate room. But 28 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, there was a soft knock on the bridal room door. Marcus Williams, Tom's best man and closest friend since college, asked if he could speak with Jessica privately. The expression on Marcus's face immediately made Jessica's stomach drop. This was not the pre-wedding greeting she had expected from a man who would be standing beside Tom at the altar. "Jessica, I need to tell you something, and I know the timing is terrible," Marcus said, his voice shaking with emotion. "But I can't let you marry Tom without knowing the truth. I should have told you months ago, but I kept hoping he would tell you himself." Jessica felt the room spinning as she realized that Marcus was about to reveal something that would change everything about this perfect day she'd been planning and dreaming about for 2 years. "What are you talking about, Marcus?" Jessica asked, though part of her already knew that whatever he was about to say would destroy the happiness she had been feeling just moments before. Marcus took a deep breath and delivered the words that would stop Jessica's wedding and shatter her understanding of the man she was about to marry. "Tom is already married, Jessica. He never got divorced from his first wife, and you can't legally marry him because he's still married to someone else. If this story truly touches your heart, let's speak for you. Like this video, subscribe to be part of our journey, and share your feelings in the comments." Jessica Martinez and Tom Richardson had met 4 years earlier at a mutual friend's birthday party, where their connection had been immediate and intense. Tom was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in building a serious relationship with someone who shared his values and life goals. From their first date, Tom had been everything Jessica thought she wanted in a partner. He was successful in his career as a marketing director, had a close group of loyal friends, and seemed ready to settle down and start a family. Their relationship had progressed naturally from casual dating to exclusive commitment to moving in together after 18 months. Tom had been open about his past, telling Jessica that he had been married briefly in his early 20s, but that the marriage had ended in divorce after 2 years due to incompatibility and different life goals. He had seemed appropriately reflective about the failure of his first marriage and had convinced Jessica that he had learned from his mistakes and was ready for a mature, lasting relationship. "I was too young when I got married the first time," Tom had explained to Jessica during one of their early conversations about their relationship goals. "I didn't really know who I was or what I wanted from life. But being with you has shown me what a real partnership can feel like." Jessica had appreciated Tom's honesty about his past and had been impressed by his apparent growth and self-awareness. She had dated men who were reluctant to discuss their relationship history, and Tom's openness had made her feel confident that they were building their relationship on a foundation of trust and communication. Their engagement had been everything Jessica had dreamed of. Tom had proposed during a romantic weekend getaway, with a ring he had designed specifically for her and a speech about how Jessica had changed his understanding of what love could be. The proposal had been followed by an engagement party where Tom's friends and family had welcomed Jessica warmly and had seemed genuinely excited about their upcoming marriage. Planning their wedding had been a joyful process that had brought Jessica and Tom closer together. They had agreed on most major decisions, had worked well together to coordinate the complex logistics of a large wedding, and had seemed to share the same vision for their married life together. Jessica had been particularly impressed by Tom's relationship with his best man Marcus, whose loyalty and friendship seemed to reflect well on Tom's character. Marcus had been helpful throughout the wedding planning process, and had seemed genuinely happy for his friend's engagement. But what Jessica didn't know was that Marcus had been struggling with knowledge about Tom's past that would have changed everything about their relationship if Jessica had known the truth. Marcus had discovered that Tom's first marriage had never been legally dissolved and that Tom was planning to commit bigamy by marrying Jessica while still legally married to his first wife. Marcus Williams had been carrying the burden of Tom's secret for over a year, watching his best friend deceive the woman who trusted him completely. But telling Jessica the truth would destroy not just her wedding day, but potentially Tom's entire life. Marcus Williams had discovered Tom's secret 18 months earlier, during what was supposed to be a casual conversation about wedding planning and marriage advice. Tom had been drinking more than usual during a bachelor party for another friend, and his guard had dropped enough for him to reveal information that Marcus had never expected to hear. "You know what's crazy, Marcus?" Tom had said during the bachelor party. "I'm about to get married again, and I never actually got divorced from Sarah. The paperwork was such a mess, and she moved to another state, so we just never finished the legal process." Marcus had initially assumed that Tom was making a dark joke or exaggerating the complexity of his divorce proceedings. But as Tom continued talking, Marcus realized that his best friend was serious about being technically still married to his first wife while planning to marry Jessica. "Are you telling me that you're planning to commit bigamy?" Marcus had asked, sobering up quickly as he realized the legal and ethical implications of what Tom was revealing. "It's not really bigamy if the first marriage was basically over years ago," Tom had rationalized. "Sarah and I haven't spoken in 3 years. We've both moved on with our lives. And the only thing left is some paperwork that nobody cares about except lawyers and bureaucrats." Marcus had tried to convince Tom to resolve his legal status before marrying Jessica, but Tom had dismissed his concerns and had made Marcus promise not to tell Jessica about the situation. "She doesn't need to know about legal technicalities," Tom had insisted. "Sarah and I are done. Jessica and I are building a real life together, and some old paperwork doesn't change any of that. If you tell Jessica about this, you'll ruin her happiness for no good reason." Marcus had been torn between loyalty to his best friend and his growing concern for Jessica, who clearly had no idea that her marriage to Tom would not be legally valid. Over the following months, Marcus had repeatedly urged Tom to file for divorce from Sarah and to be honest with Jessica about his legal status. But Tom had continued to avoid dealing with his first marriage, apparently convinced that he could simply ignore the legal complications and proceed with his wedding to Jessica as if his marriage to Sarah had never happened. "I kept telling myself that Tom would eventually do the right thing," Marcus would later explain. "But as the wedding got closer, I realized that he was never going to tell Jessica the truth, and that she was going to find out eventually in a way that would be much more devastating than hearing it from me." The decision to tell Jessica the truth on her wedding day had been the most difficult choice Marcus had ever made, but he had concluded that allowing her to go through a marriage that was not legally valid would be a greater betrayal than stopping the wedding with devastating news. Jessica's initial disbelief would quickly transform into horror as Marcus provided proof of Tom's deception, and she would have to process the reality that her entire relationship had been built on lies. Jessica's first reaction to Marcus's revelation was complete disbelief and anger at what seemed like a cruel joke being played at the worst possible moment. "That's not possible, Marcus," Jessica said firmly. "Tom told me he was divorced. I've seen his divorce papers. We wouldn't have planned this wedding if he was still married to someone else." But Marcus had come prepared for Jessica's disbelief, and he pulled out his phone to show her documentation that would prove Tom's deception and the legal impossibility of their planned marriage. "These are copies of public records that show Tom's marriage to Sarah Mitchell in 2019, Marcus explained, showing Jessica official documents on his phone screen. "And these are records showing that no divorce decree was ever filed in any state where they lived together." Jessica stared at the documents on Marcus's phone, trying to process information that contradicted everything she thought she knew about Tom's legal status and their relationship. "But I've seen his divorce papers," Jessica repeated, though her voice was becoming less certain as the evidence Marcus was showing her began to sink in. "Tom may have shown you paperwork that looked like divorce documents," Marcus said gently, "but what he showed you weren't legally valid. I've checked with multiple court systems, and there's no record of Tom ever filing for divorce from Sarah Mitchell." As the truth began to penetrate Jessica's shock, she realized that not only was her wedding ceremony about to be invalid, but that Tom had been systematically lying to her about fundamental aspects of his legal status and their relationship. "How long have you known about this?" Jessica asked Marcus, her anger beginning to shift from the messenger to the man who had deceived her. "I've known for 18 months, Marcus admitted. "I kept hoping Tom would resolve the situation and tell you the truth, but as the wedding got closer, I realized he was never going to be honest with you about this. Jessica felt sick as she realized that Marcus had been watching her plan a wedding that couldn't legally take place, while Tom had been allowing her to invest time, money, and emotional energy in a ceremony that would be meaningless. But Marcus had more devastating news to share with Jessica about the scope of Tom's deception. "There's something else you need to know," Marcus continued. "Tom has been in contact with Sarah throughout your entire relationship. They never stopped talking, and she thinks they're working toward reconciling their marriage." The revelation that Tom had been maintaining contact with his first wife while planning to marry Jessica was a final blow that would transform Jessica's wedding day from the happiest day of her life into the most devastating betrayal she had ever experienced. Jessica would have to make the most difficult decision of her life: confront Tom about his lies in front of 200 wedding guests, or walk away from the altar and the man she had loved for 4 years. Jessica sat in the bridal preparation room for 10 minutes after Marcus left, tried to process the reality that her wedding ceremony could not proceed as planned, and that the man she was supposed to marry had been living a double life throughout their entire relationship. The practical implications of Marcus's revelation were overwhelming. Jessica had 200 guests waiting for a ceremony that could not legally take place. She had vendors, photographers, and catering arrangements that would need to be canceled. She had family members who had traveled from across the country to witness her marriage to a man who was already married to someone else. But the emotional implications were even more devastating. Jessica realized that Tom had been lying to her about fundamental aspects of his identity and his past for their entire 4-year relationship. The trust that had been the foundation of their love had been completely destroyed by revelations that went far beyond the legal technicalities of his marital status. Jessica made the decision to confront Tom directly before making any announcements to their wedding guests. She needed to hear his explanation for the deception and to understand the full scope of the lies that had shaped their relationship. When Jessica found Tom in the groom's preparation room, he immediately knew from her expression that something was catastrophically wrong. "Marcus told you, didn't he?" Tom said before Jessica could speak, confirming that he had been expecting this confrontation. "How could you do this to me?" Jessica asked, her voice barely controlled. "How could you let me plan our entire wedding knowing that you're still married to someone else?" Tom's explanation revealed the depth of his selfishness and his inability to face difficult truths about his past and his behavior. "I knew I should have gotten divorced from Sarah before we got serious, but the legal process was complicated and expensive," Tom said. "And then as our relationship got more serious, I was afraid that telling you the truth would make you question everything about our relationship. So instead of being honest, you decided to let me commit bigamy unknowingly?" Jessica was incredulous at Tom's casual attitude toward the legal and ethical implications of his deception. "It's not really bigamy if the first marriage was essentially over." Tom repeated the rationalization he had used with Marcus. "Sarah and I haven't been together as a couple in years. Our marriage was just paperwork that we never got around to finishing." But Jessica demanded to know about Tom's ongoing contact with Sarah, which Marcus had mentioned as evidence that Tom's first marriage was not as over as he claimed. Tom's admission about his relationship with Sarah would prove that his deception had been even more calculated and cruel than Jessica had initially realized. "Sarah and I have stayed in touch because we had some financial entanglements that took time to resolve," Tom explained. "But we've talked about the possibility of trying to work things out. I wasn't sure if I wanted to divorce her or try to repair our marriage until I met you." The revelation that Tom had been using Jessica as a way to decide between her and his first wife was the final betrayal that would end their relationship permanently. Jessica's decision to cancel the wedding would create chaos and heartbreak for everyone involved, but it would also save her from a marriage built on lies that would have eventually destroyed her life. Jessica's confrontation with Tom continued for another 30 minutes, during which she learned the full scope of his deception and manipulation. Not only had he been lying about his marital status, but he had also been dishonest about his financial situation, his relationship with his family, and his intentions regarding their future together. "I need you to go out there and tell our guests that the wedding is canceled," Jessica told Tom with a finality that made it clear their relationship was over permanently. "Jessica, please don't do this," Tom begged. "I know I should have been honest with you from the beginning, but I love you. We can work through this." I'll file for divorce from Sarah tomorrow, and we can have a real wedding in a few months. But Jessica had realized that Tom's willingness to lie about fundamental aspects of his identity meant that she could never trust him about anything, regardless of what legal steps he might take to resolve his marital status. "You had 4 years to be honest with me," Jessica replied. "You had dozens of opportunities to tell me the truth before letting me plan a wedding that couldn't legally happen. The fact that you were willing to let me walk down that aisle today without knowing that our marriage would be invalid tells me everything I need to know about your character." Tom's refusal to take responsibility for the scope of his deception made Jessica's decision easier, but it didn't make the process of canceling their wedding any less devastating. Jessica asked her maid of honor to help her make the announcement to their wedding guests while she changed out of her wedding dress and prepared to leave the church. The announcement created shock, confusion, and heartbreak for family members who had been looking forward to celebrating Jessica and Tom's marriage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to inform you that today's wedding ceremony has been canceled due to circumstances that have just come to light," Jessica's maid of honor announced to the assembled guests. "Jessica and Tom will not be getting married today, and they ask for your privacy and understanding during this difficult time." The aftermath of the canceled wedding was chaotic and painful for everyone involved. Jessica's family was devastated for her and angry at Tom for his deception. Tom's family was confused and embarrassed by the revelations about his legal status and his dishonesty. But Jessica felt relief underneath her heartbreak, knowing that she had discovered Tom's true character before legally binding herself to someone who was capable of such elaborate and sustained deception. "I was devastated that my wedding day was ruined," Jessica would later reflect, "but I was also grateful that I learned the truth before it was too late to walk away." The legal and financial complications of Jessica's canceled wedding would be nothing compared to the emotional journey of rebuilding her life after discovering that the man she loved had been living a lie for their entire relationship. The weeks following Jessica's canceled wedding were filled with practical tasks that served as distractions from the emotional processing she would eventually need to do about Tom's betrayal. She had to return wedding gifts, cancel honeymoon reservations, and deal with vendors who had provided services for a wedding that didn't happen. But Jessica also had to confront the reality that her entire 4-year relationship with Tom had been based on lies that went far beyond his undisclosed marital status. The investigation into Tom's deception revealed additional dishonesty about his finances, his family relationships, and his intentions regarding their future together. "Once I started looking carefully at other aspects of Tom's life, I realized that he had been lying about many things throughout our relationship," Jessica explained. "The undisclosed marriage was just the most dramatic example of a pattern of dishonesty that had shaped everything about how I knew him." Jessica learned that Tom had significant debts he had hidden from her, that his relationship with his family was much more complicated than he had described, and that he had been maintaining inappropriate relationships with multiple ex-girlfriends throughout their engagement. "I realized that I had fallen in love with a fictional character that Tom had created," Jessica said. "The man I thought I was going to marry didn't really exist." The emotional recovery from such a comprehensive betrayal required professional therapy and the support of family and friends who helped Jessica understand that Tom's deception reflected his character rather than any failure on her part. "I spent months questioning my judgment and wondering how I could have been so completely fooled by someone I lived with and thought I knew intimately," Jessica admitted. "But my therapist helped me understand that Tom had been deliberately manipulative and that recognizing sophisticated deception isn't always possible, even for intelligent, cautious people." Jessica's story became a cautionary tale that she shared with other women who were planning weddings, emphasizing the importance of verifying important information about partners and trusting instincts when something doesn't feel right about a relationship. "I wish I had done more background checking before getting engaged," Jessica said. "But I also learned that some people are skilled enough at manipulation that they can fool anyone, and that the most important thing is being willing to walk away when you discover lies, regardless of how much you've invested in the relationship. If you made it all the way here, it means this story truly held you. So don't leave without showing some love. Hit like, subscribe to stay with us, and drop a comment. I'll be here, reading every word you share." 2 years after her wedding was stopped by Marcus's revelation, Jessica Martinez had rebuilt her life and was beginning to understand the experience as a blessing rather than a tragedy. The devastating discovery of Tom's lies had saved her from a marriage that would have eventually destroyed her financially and emotionally. Jessica had moved to a new city, started a new job, and was in the process of building relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. The experience with Tom had made her more cautious about trusting new romantic partners, but it also made her clearer about her own values and non-negotiable relationship requirements. "I learned that I would rather be alone than be with someone who lies to me," Jessica said. "Tom's deception taught me that trust is not something that can be rebuilt after it's been systematically violated over years." Jessica had also maintained a friendship with Marcus Williams, whose courage in telling her the truth had saved her from legal and emotional complications that would have been far worse than a canceled wedding. "Marcus risked his friendship with Tom to protect me from marrying someone who was already married," Jessica said. "His honesty was painful in the moment, but it was also the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Marcus had lost his friendship with Tom as a result of revealing the truth about his marital status, but he had no regrets about his decision to tell Jessica what she needed to know. "I couldn't live with myself if I had let Jessica go through with that wedding," Marcus explained. "Tom was my best friend, but what he was doing to Jessica was wrong, and friendship doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their bad choices." The legal investigation into Tom's marital status revealed that he had been engaged in a pattern of deception that extended beyond his relationship with Jessica. His first wife, Sarah, had been unaware that Tom was planning to marry someone else, and she had been pursuing reconciliation based on Tom's promises that he was committed to repairing their marriage. Tom had been lying to both women simultaneously, the investigation revealed. He was telling Sarah that he wanted to work on their marriage while planning to marry Jessica. Neither woman knew about his promises to the other. Tom eventually faced legal consequences for his attempted bigamy and for financial fraud related to his hidden debts and dishonest financial disclosures. But the legal justice was less important to Jessica than the personal growth she had achieved through processing betrayal and rebuilding her life. "I'm grateful that Marcus told me the truth, even though it was devastating at the time," Jessica concluded. "Being deceived for 4 years was painful, but being deceived for the rest of my life would have been much worse. Sometimes the people who hurt us in the short term are actually the ones who save us in the long term." Jessica's story became an example of how devastating betrayals can ultimately lead to stronger, more authentic relationships when people are willing to face difficult truths and rebuild their lives based on honesty and self-respect.